Sounds like somebody's out.
Sounds like the sea.
Wild.
Anyway, let's just go for it.
Okay.
If you do feel like muting, please do mute. Okay, so who am I? It was very nice of David to say I'm a guru. I don't think of myself of that at all. I really do think that I've got a lot of imposter syndrome. Like quite often I think, why am I doing this? Am I any good at UX at all? That happens like weekly, probably. But I've been doing it for over 20 years, just by a kind of chance of when I was born. Like, you know, I was born at the right time that broadband became popular and the internet exploded, and some of my first roles were in effectively user experience. I did human computer interaction at university as part of a computer science degree. And I've worked for a really wide range of companies. I think that's relevant to this because I've managed to get results as a freelancer, building projects for people, in startups where there's only a few people, right the way up to big government departments and, you know, mega corporations where I've managed to get things done. And I think a lot of what I've learned over the last sort of 20 years has been less about design and more about how to get results in organizations. So I'm going to tell you some of my tips that I've been using in this slide deck, which may or may not work for you, but I hope they do. Okay, so I'll start with a story which doesn't sound like it's relevant, but actually is relevant. So back in the day, in the sort of early 2000s, there was a programming language called Ruby, and there was a framework called Rails. And Ruby on Rails became really popular. And one of the reasons it became popular is it was what's called opinionated. And it was therefore sort of principled. So you had a lot of flexibility, you could do whatever you wanted, but it had a few kind of out of the box things that would always work, like opinionated principles. So if you wanted to throw up a login form, or a forgot password flow, or an avatar, view avatar, edit avatar, save, crop, all of those things were kind of built into Rails out of the box. And because of that, it meant that people could throw up sites really quickly. You could chuck together a web application quite quickly, and it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be 80% of the way there. And it was used by GitHub, Pinterest, and Twitter. So those three big startups of that kind of era were all built on Ruby on Rails, and it allowed them to get something out really quick, and get to market 10 times quicker than a lot of other people. So I thought being opinionated is good, right? There are 1,000 ways to do things, but there are some kind of core principles that if you follow, they will get you 80% of the way there. This is the only advert for the book, I promise, and it's relevant. So I wrote a book in 2018 and I rewrote it again in 2022, and it's 101 UX principles. I wanted to call it opinionated user experience principles, but the publishers wouldn't let me because they didn't think that anyone would know what that meant. But I was going for the same kind of thing as Ruby on Rails was going for. When you start a blog, you have a list of posts with excerpts. You click on a title, you go to the blog post. All of that stuff's built into Rails. It comes out of the box. And in a way, I thought, wouldn't it be good to do UX in a similar sort of way? So if you want to do sliders or a contact form, or you want to take telephone numbers or whatever, 101 different things, here is a step-by-step guide to how it will work most of the time. It won't always be right. You might have a weird product, a weird market, a weird user. Fine, you can tweak it, but it'll get you 80% of the way there. That was the idea. So the problem with that is that once you've learned all of these principles, they become kind of like dogma. They become things that you think, well, okay, well, we would only really use a slider for volume controls or brightness, but this person thinks it's a good idea to have a slider for a house price value UI, right? And then you can get too entrenched and you can say, well, hang on, the principles say you shouldn't do this. And I think, you have this kind of beautiful structure of all these principles that kind of lock together in this nice ordered way. But working in an organization is like this. It's like beans. It's mess. And I think one of the problems is that you have all of these competing departments and competing priorities. So, marketing care about their new brand campaign. Sales care about hitting their KPIs for the next quarter. And you have all of these competing priorities and competing teams inside businesses, which kind of start to erode your principles and erode your sort of opinionated way of doing things. So I guess the number one thing I keep getting asked, so since the book came out, is this is the number one question people keep asking me, is like, these are all great principles, but how can I actually get results at work with these? How can I put these into practice in a way that the organization will listen to and respect and so on? So when I rewrote the book, I put together this chapter, which is what I'm kind of turning into a slide deck here. So here we go. So the first one, you probably already know this, but the key point of this is your role as a user experience professional is to be the voice of the user around the table, right? That's really your main job. And I suppose I've kind of put a get out here, which is you won't win every battle, and that's true. And I think early on in my career, I found it really hard to do some of these compromises because I felt like I had to win every battle with marketing or sales or engineering. And I put too much pressure on myself to try and win all these battles for the users. And then someone senior to me a few years ago told me, you know what, it doesn't matter if you win every battle. All that matters is that you are kind of that voice around the table. You're putting the user there. You're thinking of their best interests. You're avoiding dark patterns. You're trying to optimize things. And sometimes it's enough to just show up and be in the room and have those conversations. But yeah, and then I've become quite obsessed with design systems lately. So I put in a little kind of bonus thing onto most of these about the sort of the power of design systems. If you have an organizational design system, when you do win a battle like this, you can then bake it into the design system, and that benefit then ripples out to all of the products that use it. Yeah, so that's number one. You probably already know this, but day-to-day business involves competing departments, and in amongst the fray of departments arguing with each other, you need to be the voice of the user in that battle. Yeah, making friends. So I don't think I'm brilliant at making friends. I think I'm okay at it. But in my last sort of 2 jobs, it's been sort of my superpower, because my first job was fully remote. My second job was my current job, I mean, was made remote by the pandemic. And then suddenly I started at the same time as a bunch of other people, and we had to build relationships over video calls and IRC chat messages. We actually used to use IRC, believe it or not. We've recently switched to something a bit better, but yeah, the most effective way is to make friends. And I count among some of my closest friends at work, front-end engineers, product managers, maybe not the CEO, but you know, I feel like I can talk to them and I have a relationship with them. And if you're not a people-y person and you're not good at making friends and building rapport with people, I think you can still do UX, but I think you're going to make it a lot harder for yourself, because those relationships are, for me, some of the key things that have got stuff done for me. They've been the developer who's been stuck on implementing something and DM me and said, hey, can you take a look at this because I value a bit of UX input on it? Or the product manager who's thinking, I'm building the roadmap for the next cycle. We've got some capacity. What UX things would you like to work on this cycle? And if they didn't know me or they didn't like me, those things wouldn't happen. So you have to make friends with people. Take them along on your process with you. I think this is so important. I think this is how I've managed to do it, is involving these people in the process. So we use Dovetail for our user research, which lets you record little video clips and put transcripts on and stuff. We share Dovetail stuff with people. We show them, we say, hey, here's a customer using your part of the product, Mr. Product Manager or Miss Product Manager, and this is them getting stuck on this or not understanding why. And they're suddenly kind of exposed to the same research as you, and they go, oh yeah, I get it. It's not hitting them with a trove of analytics, but it is showing them a few anecdotal examples. That's worked really well. Also, designing in the open. So if you use Miro or Figma or any of these collaborative tools, you can add people to your boards, give them comment access, maybe not edit access, give them comment access, let them leave comments, reply to their comments, take them along on the process. As you build a new frame for a new version, at them again and say, hey, this is version 2.1. I fixed this thing. Let me know what you think. They won't always look at it. They won't always appreciate it. But I think reaching out and making friends helps. And then more design system obsession is when you're using a design system, this helps non-designers to get involved. So if you have a pattern library or a component library and it's in Figma, then it becomes a drag and drop thing for a product manager to quickly throw something together. You don't want them doing the design, you don't want them doing the full thinking piece about the interaction or the research, but if they've got an idea for how we could tweak something, I'm happy to see a janky Figma mock-up done by a product manager because it helps me get inside the head of what they were trying to achieve. It might not fit with what you want to do or what you think your users want, but it's a good way of involving them in the process, I think. Yeah, build allies, really important. Okay, the next one. This is one that I think kind of contradicts one, right? So number one, fight for the user. Don't care about those business metrics and KPIs, care about people. But three, this is the hard part, right? Is that you won't survive for long if you just care about just the user's voice. It's possible to build stuff that's both friendly to users and usable, and at the same time also delivers business goals. But you've got to know what those business goals are, and it will vary. You know, there's 25 people on this call, right? It'll vary if you're in government or NGO or a charity or you're B2B or B2C or some weird combination of it all, right? It's all different, but ultimately businesses have to make money. That's the core reason they exist. And you can't work in a vacuum. Your success depends on the product and the service and the company being successful. So one of the ways that I've managed to do this, or I've tried to do this, is help shape that roadmap and the business plan with the product managers. So where I work now, the product managers and the marketing people are quite deeply involved in business planning, looking at the next year, looking at the next quarters and working out what we want to sell into where, what things we want to grow, what things we think are doing okay and we don't need to grow. And being involved in that from a UX point of view is really valuable because you can say, well, I'll give you an example. We sell a subscription product. Churn is quite high for some of it, for a certain type of customer. And if one of the metrics is to increase revenue, increase adoption, reduce churn, then you can link straight into that and say, look, I can see that you've got a KPI to reduce churn by 2% next quarter. Give me a few cycles to work on that and build it into the user experience plan. And we can do some conversion optimization. We can go do interviews and work out why people are churning. You've got to get involved in that. And I think, you know, there are a lot of UX, and certainly earlier in my career, we were very much we were like an agency model. You know, there was the design team that you chucked briefs into and artwork and designs came out the other end. And that's fine, I guess, but it's not very involved with the business, and you become a dispensable resource that can just be swapped out for any other design team. So yeah, I guess it's at odds with one in some ways. If sales want more leads, and that's a KPI, and they think they can get more leads by throwing up a full screen pop-up asking for email addresses, then you've got to say, well, look, this isn't the best way to get leads. This is just going to piss people off. So yeah, that's three. I'm going through these quite fast. I thought there was more content in here, honestly, but there's not. Yeah, build a culture of research. I think more so than wireframes or mock-ups or prototypes, I think research has been the number one thing that's helped me to change people's minds in an organization. I think it depends who they are, but I think a lot of people in sales, marketing, customer success, growth, they're all very metrics driven people. They do care about conversion rates and click-throughs and churn and those sorts of numbers. And you can show them the analytics, obviously, if you've got, you know, a decent analytics setup on your products, but also bring them into your research sessions. So we do a ton of user research. We're talking to users every single week. So I'll have at least 1 or 2 user interviews every week, week after week after week. I should mention that this talk is not in my capacity in my job. It's about my book and my experience. But I work for Ubuntu, the Linux operating system, So we have like millions and millions and millions of customers, and it's relatively easy for us to go and pluck people out of that and say, hey, would you like to take part in a research study? So we don't struggle to recruit people, and that's such a blessing because it means that we can always go back into that pool and get people out. But yeah, modern testing tools like Dovetail, or I guess Loom as well, anything that lets you kind of share video recordings are really useful for just getting someone's eyes on a, go to this timestamp, go to 1 minute 20, and look, this guy doesn't understand this thing. He just doesn't understand what we're trying to present here. Or he understands it wrong. He thinks he knows what it is. Those are always good. But yeah, I've definitely managed to change people's minds by building research into cycles and workloads, and also bringing people along with those research sessions. It's easier said than done. They don't always want to get involved, but I think people are naturally interested in human behavior and customers. And I think if you give people the chance to watch customers use your products, that they're generally going to take that chance. And then again, you can bake these learnings into your design system. So if you are using a design system, then as you progress along it and evolve it, you're baking in all, you're standing on the shoulders of all the research that's gone before you and building those learnings in. So yeah, I think that's a good one. The final one, this is interesting because I think a lot of companies want to be data driven, and they say they are, but they're not. Or a lot of organizations are just starting down that path of beginning to use data to make these decisions. And it always surprises me how in both SMEs and bigger organizations, there's a real disconnect with the people who collect the data and the analytics and know it all, or at least sort of anecdotally understand the shape of it, and the people who have to make decisions. And you can't over communicate that. You can't tell people enough times. So things that you can do are, first of all, you go into the data, use the quantitative data to provide suggestions on product features and missing services. Do a digest, maybe do like a monthly email from the UX team to the rest of the product group, which says, here's some analytics learnings that we've made this month. You can share things like full story sessions or reports from GA. One of the other things that's good for is working with product managers. So often product managers will have a sense from the user base of what they need to do next, and a sense from management and other stakeholders. And you can help be the people who have that sense from the users as well. You can go into their meetings and say, look, this is a great idea and it's important, but we feel like there's a higher priority here, which is everyone's getting stuck signing in, or something pretty horrific from your analytics. Yeah, and I guess it's more building of relationships. It's more kind of putting your tentacles, like if you're a UX octopus, it's putting your tentacles into different parts of the organization. And I really think you need to do that. I think if you could talk to marketing, growth teams, demand generation, as well as product and other parts of the organization, then you're going to have more friends, more people who know about you, raise the profile of what you're doing in the organization, and hopefully get involved, like a positive feedback loop. You'll get involved in the next time around when they want to ask you more stuff. There is a quick summary of all of the things that I thought of. Yeah, these are the things that I've done that have worked quite well for me. So I'd be really interested in hearing like what kind of things work for you. So it doesn't have to be questions. It can be like, have you had successes with these things? Have you found any other methods that work really well? Or yeah, that's it.
Well, thanks, Will. That was great.
It was short.
Sure. Well, it's good too. If you want to ask questions, it would be best to type them into the chat box.
Yeah, type them in the chat box.
I can read them out. I mean, I could.
Stop sharing. There we go.
I could start just by asking you about. You're talking about tools for collaboration.
Yeah.
Do you want to just say more about the tools you use daily?
Yeah. So I use Miro for whiteboarding, journey mapping. I mean, honestly, Miro is like my #1 use tool at the moment. I use Miro for everything, for a couple of reasons. One, because it's simple and it's web-based and it's collaborative. So, you know, it's easy for people to get into and access. And the other one is because it uses metaphors that non-designers understand. I think if you drop a non-designer into Figma and say, hey, come and have a look at this, Figma's got a lot of tools and a lot of little sliders and controls. And if you're not a designer, you're like, oh, what's this? Whereas you drop someone into Miro and it's like, oh, it's a big board with post-it notes on. I get this. I can move these around. You know, you don't want people who are specialists in other disciplines having to learn your stuff. So I use Miro for pretty much everything. I use Figma for high fidelity mockups and prototyping. And yeah, for user research, we use something called Dovetail, which is, it lets you video record the user interviews or upload your videos from another source. Then it auto transcribes them all, breaks it into little sentences, and you can tag them with, you know, sentiment or intent. And then you can do kind of aggregation stuff on that and see like a tag cloud or search for different sentiments and stuff. That's really good. And then for analytics, we use Google Analytics and Hotjar. We don't use Full Story, although I have used Full Story in different places and I've been really impressed with it. I think it's just really expensive.
It's very expensive.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, my role is UX manager, so I don't do as much design anymore. I mostly manage a team of UX designers and help unblock them and help them get better at their job. So mostly I type messages and do video calls. That's like 80% of my job. I can still work the tools if I need to, you know. In a zombie apocalypse, if someone needs a mock-up doing, I can go on Figma and do that.
Yeah, sounds great. So you're just typing all day?
Mostly typing. Yeah, and I think I can write well. I think it's one of my few skills, and I think in the post-pandemic world, being able to write well is a superpower because you're spending so much time on chat, typing in chat boxes. I mean, I have WhatsApp, Telegram, and Slack open now, and they're all for work. There's different things about work. People messaging me gossip on WhatsApp, and people doing an ad hoc group on Telegram, and you know, it's there's a lot of chat. And I think if you could write well and get your point across clearly with people, then that's really powerful. And it wasn't so important before because you could just have a meeting with them. But in the post-pandemic world, I think it's changed a bit.
Yeah.
What's the harder department to get along with, in your opinion? I think product management. I think product managers, because I think that there's a certain element of sales, marketing, those kind of guys. You sort of know what they're trying to do, and they don't really understand what you do a lot of the time. They do, but not as deeply as product managers. Product managers really get it, and that makes them more dangerous. Because a product manager, I mean, I haven't been a product manager, but I'm friends with a few, and they do describe it as one of like the worst jobs because you're saying no to everyone, right? You've got all these customer requests coming in, and you're saying, well, we can only do 2 of these, so no. You've got the CEO and the senior stakeholders saying, right, we need to hit this, this, and this, and they're like, well, we've only got so much capacity, so no. And you're saying no to the developers when they say, look, can we push this out 2 cycles? Like, no, need to ship it now. So I feel like they're in a really difficult position. They're constantly trying to push against every direction, and often and if you're not a strong voice in UX, then UX gets pushed to the bottom of the pile, and it's like, well, we haven't got time to design this, just chuck out something basic, we'll get the front end guys to do it, and the next thing you know, you've got some legacy nightmare thing to maintain for 5 years. Grace, I don't actually. I don't have anything on that. So Grace says, I'm wondering if you know any books, podcast resources to get more knowledge on business and a better understanding of the business side of the company. I would love some recommendations on that. So when I wrote this chapter in the book, it was because it was the #1 thing that gets asked me whenever I do talks, people on LinkedIn, all kinds of people ask me that question. So I think there's a gap in the market there. Somebody should write that book.
Yeah, there is something. I can't remember the name. I'll put a name of a book in the chat because it's just gone off the top of my head there. So
I think the Leah Burley book, User Experience, User Research Team of 1.
One, I'm looking at that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's got some stuff in it about it, because that's kind of about, you know, you're the only UX person. What do you do? So there's stuff in that. Um,
they have some. They have another book actually. That's one I'm trying to remember, but I'll look it up there and I'll put it in. Yep.
but no, I'd love to see more of that stuff, because I'm sure everyone's found it hard. You know, in theory, you're a good designer, but sometimes that doesn't count for anything if your organization won't work with you, or you find it hard to kind of pull the right levers to get things done.
So maybe how to get along with product managers.
Yeah,
is a good title for you to write next.
As a UX manager, this is a great question. As a UX manager, what kind of questions do you like from new members of your team? I like it when people try to deeply understand the products. So we just had a new hire who joined my team, and she came from marketing, and she'd spent probably 3 to 5 years working in marketing roles, absolutely no UX experience at all. And she did a couple of UX boot camps. I think she did the Coursera one and the Google one. No, Coursera and the General Assembly one. Applied for the role internally, and we moved her across, and she's fantastic. She's fantastic because she asks tons of questions about the products. I think the area that I work in is super technical, to the point where I don't understand like half of it. Like it's really super nerdy stuff. And she's gone really deep on this. So she's worked really hard to understand it. She's reading data sheets and learning the product and watching YouTube videos. So I think, yeah, a good question is like, how can I understand this product more? But honestly, really, any questions are good. What you don't want is people who don't ask any questions, think that they're doing fine, and then you find that they're not. But I think a lot of the stuff in this talk is stuff that I'd be saying to new starters, really, is, you know, go and try and build allies, go to all those sync meetings that you get invited to, and try to talk about your work and get noticed. I mean, the company that I work for is about 1,000 people. So when I joined, it was about 500, and now it's about 1,000. So, you know, it's not Google scale or Microsoft scale or anything like that, but it's still significantly bigger than an SME. Is it an SME? I don't know. Would it still count as that? Maybe. But yeah, in 1,000 people, you can quite easily get lost, and people can not really notice you. So yeah, I think that's a good question. I'm also doing a huge amount of hiring as well. So I've learned a ton about hiring UX people. And it's kind of similar. Like when I look at someone's CV, the things that stand out to me are always the stuff that they're interested in. Like they're genuinely interested in it. So I've done a speculative redesign of Instagram for blind people. Here are all my thoughts. You know, things like that, where they care deeply about the craft and they want to go deep on something and actually learn it. That speaks to me much more than I've got a master's degree in human factors from some university. Fine, you know, that's great, but I would much rather see that you're deeply interested in this craft and you're passionate about learning it and getting better. And I think there's lots of ways you could do that, but they're not always like obvious ways.
Great. I just put it in 2 books there.
Hey, they are the Rosenfeld ones, but I forgot the title.
Yeah, Why We Fail and Product Management for UX People, which is what it says on the tin, I suppose.
It's nice. Honestly, I would buy any Rosenfeld book that I see. Generally, they're all fantastic. Most of them, I mean, I've got a few of them, and they're all good. So I haven't got those.
I mean, so many of them, and they're nicely designed as well. So I have another question about UX research. You were talking about. I'm not sure if you were talking more about testing or, you know, deep UX research. Like, how do you go, or your team go about doing that?
So we do less testing than we used to do, because we found that, well, we'll come back to that. So what we've started doing more of is, I guess you would call it ethnographic interviewing, I suppose. So interviewing people, in short. So we tend to structure it as a 45-minute video call. We have a running order on a Google Doc of just the key bullet points of things that we want to hit. And we have 2 people on the call, one asking the questions and one making notes. And we record the call as well. Obviously, we ask the participants' permission. And then at the end of that, we've had, sometimes we cut them off early. Sometimes we get to 25, 30 minutes and, we've got what we're going to get. Or sometimes we go on a bit longer, but we always tell people it's about 45 minutes so they don't, there's a lot of psychology to this. So they don't think that it's too much work for them and they don't think it's too insubstantial. There's also a kind of craft to writing the emails to invite people to user research that we've honed as well over the years. But yeah, so it's mostly a meandering interview where we talk about a bunch of different things. So let's say we have a product, a subscription support product that costs £1 million a year. There's only, there's not millions of customers for that. There's probably tens of thousands of customers for that. So we go and find a few of those and we have an interview with them about the kind of things that that package does. Does it support this? Does it support that? How would you expect to administer it? What kind of tools do you think are missing from it? And have those kind of wide-ranging, quite woolly interview style chats with people. I should say that the user researcher that I work with, she's got like a PhD in psychology or something. She's super smart and she's fantastic. And I just like take notes. She asks all the questions. It's great. And we put it into Dovetail and we can tag it all up and we can get sentiment analysis. And I suppose, all it really does is steer your gut feeling as a designer. That's all it does. If someone says, I absolutely hate this feature, you should not build it. That doesn't mean tomorrow I'm going to go and kill the feature. It means I'm going to think, well, actually, 4 other people said they would really like this. What's this person not liking about it? And how can I tweak how we're doing these things? So I think you just use it to inform your own positions already that you've learned over the years from corporate culture and other research. And you have this kind of blob in your head of like UX that you can't untangle anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like over the years, you have all this weird experience that you don't really know how to unpick. And research just informs that, I think. It steers you slightly in different directions, but I don't think it changes things massively. It doesn't for me anyway.
And do you find it might open up new possibilities for something completely different?
I mean, it hasn't so far for me, and I wonder why that is. And I wonder if maybe because ultimately in the organization I work in and have worked in the past, the product manager's job is to set the vision and the roadmap for the product, right? And as a UX person, I'm happy working for a product manager, working with them, but ultimately meeting their needs, really. That's kind of the relationship. And I'm not sure they see the same sort of depth of research that we do. And they probably have someone above them saying, hey, go build this feature. And if they have me from the other side saying, people don't want this feature, I'm not sure they'll listen to me. And I've definitely found that hard over the years. I wonder if product managers should have their own research arm and do more of that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to ask you about. Like when you're saying they can be harder to get along with, but do you find who's pushing the agenda? I know the PM sometimes is, but sometimes they're probably looking for you to obviously come up with a solution, but help them, and they're probably desperate kind of sometimes for you to come up with something.
Yeah, a lot of the time they see customers at user groups and events and trade shows and stuff, and they get a very limited kind of slice of what users are telling them, versus people who are in research more, who are exposed to more and more user opinions. It's a really tricky one. I mean, so we've got a user research department, but we've only got 3 people in it. So I think it's like we've got 12 UX people. So they're spread quite thin, and everyone wants to get research on their project, and they're quite busy. But I would love to see it.
That sounds like a lot for most companies.
Yeah, we're a team of 12, 3 researchers, but there's 1,000 people in the company, right? And we've got 80 different products or 80 initiatives. Some of them are like more than one product, or like one will be called robotics, and it's about selling operating systems to robot factories, for example. Yeah. But that's one of the good things about where I work, is that it's quite broad. Like on one hand, we've got like checkouts and stuff. You can go online, buy support, go through a checkout basket, put your payment card in. So we've got that very consumer side of UX to do as well, of invoices and payments and shopping carts and stuff people are really familiar with. And then right at the other extreme, we've got super nerdy stuff like the UI to install a cell phone tower from a van, just random stuff like that you would just never think of. And it's nice and varied, so yeah, it's good.
So what's your favorite thing about your role at the moment?
It's probably design critique. So when I first, I've worked in places with pretty brutal design critique, places where people have been, out and out horrible about people's work. And I've worked really hard over the past few years to build a culture of good design review, based on kind of scientific or medical peer review. That's the kind of metaphor we're going for. It's not like you've designed something, let me go into your Figma and tell you why it's crap, right? That's not what we do at all. It's, I'm going to look at your work, I'm going to assume the best, that you've got the best intentions, the best data, and you've produced the best solution. And I'm just going to think, what have you not thought of? Could you approach this from a different angle? So we use words like consider, consider changing this to this, or have you thought about putting the OK and cancel buttons the other way around? Why? And we've just built this culture of like people being quite respectful to each other about their work. And I really like it. And I think we get a lot more out of it. And designers feel empowered to say no. If they look at my comment and I've said, consider making this sentence shorter, and they've thought, I've already done that, it's as short as it can be, they could just hit close and just close the comment, and they know that they're empowered to do that. So that I'm really proud of that, and I really enjoy working in that kind of environment. I think that's really good fun.
And do like all designers have that access? Is it you as a manager?
No, it's everyone. It's everyone. Everyone is treated as a peer. Nothing gets shipped without at least 2 people peer reviewing it. So you can't ship anything alone. It has to have been peer reviewed by someone before it goes out the door. But that can be anyone. That can be anyone from our most junior UX up to, it's actually me. We don't have a head of design at the moment. We're hiring for a head of design, but we haven't put the job out yet. So yeah, I guess me for now, until we hire someone in.
Right. There's another question here. How does the point of continue or stop work in a company? Do the researchers that get stopped, are they sad?
I mean, for us, it's less about continue or stop. It's more, so that does happen, but more it's the restrictive nature of the kind of agile cycles that we work in. So, one of the great things that came out of agile taking over the whole software world like 10 years ago is that the core concept is that you ship small increments of useful work out to customers, which in theory is great. And it works really well for engineers and for lots of other parts of the business. But I think it's still a struggle for UX people, because often I'll get a big feature or a big product or something large to work on, and I'll have the time. But equally often, it will be 2 weeks. The start of a 2-week cycle, it will be, we need to build a view to let people look at historic invoices, manage their invoices, set, alternative email addresses to get invoices copied to. And then you've got 2 weeks, right? So in that 2 weeks, around all of your other meetings and all your responsibilities, you've got to try and talk to some customers, get some research done, try and work out what it is you're building, get some wireframes done, get them validated, get them peer reviewed. And you just run out of time, and you end up quite often doing, half a job on something or not enough of a job. And I think it works so well in code because you can come back and iterate. That function works, it passes tests, we shipped it. We can go and optimize it later. But in UX, I feel like sometimes those 2-week cycles, or I guess some places do 1-week cycles, but I guess those cycles are quite difficult for UX people. I find them hard anyway.
Yeah.
And I think researchers always feel the same. They always feel like they haven't done enough research. or they feel like products go out without having been touched by research. You know, the right person just didn't realize that we had capacity to do something, and it got skipped. I mean, I can only imagine what it's like. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys on this call must work at, you know, huge companies, and can only imagine what it's like at, you know, Microsoft or Oracle or someone huge. Like, I'm sure loads of mad stuff happens where people don't know what the other people are doing, and yeah, it's hard. Goes back to my point about getting involved in lots of different departments as well. Oh, that's Will. He's the UX guy. Let's go and ask him about this thing. And then if it's not me, I can pass them on to the right person, and someone else can look at it. But it just keeps you out there, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Do we have any more questions from anybody out there?
I don't think so, and that's probably it. Well, it was 45 minutes. I'm happy with that.
I was going to ask you one big question to finish off. What do you see coming down the road for UX? What's the next big thing?
I've got a few ideas about this, which will inevitably be wrong, but I'm going to try anyway. They're always wrong, aren't they, when you try and predict stuff? So the first one is the rise of the design system is going to change the structure of teams substantially. So right now, a lot of companies work on a squads model or something like that, where you'll have a squad on a product or a feature which has front end, back end, product manager, UX people, so on. Visual designer sometimes, right? What happens when your design system becomes more and more established, more and more refined? You're delivering stuff faster, you're making users happy quicker, it's all good. But you no longer need that individual UX input or visual design input onto each of those teams. Suddenly you have fewer, more powerful UX people. So that's the kind of trend that I can imagine happening over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, is you'll have the roles will reduce in number in an organization, but they'll increase in seniority and control over a design system. That's one thing. And then I guess the other thing is, I hate talking about AI. Always sounds like science fiction bullshit. But if you've played with the like DALL-E 2 or Stable Diffusion, those AI models, they are incredible. Like the stuff that you can get out of DALL-E 2 is like photorealistic stuff from a prompt. So imagine if you trained an AI on your design system and thousands and thousands and billions of mockups and wireframes. It's totally possible that you could say, okay, Figma, I want a data table with these rows, these fields, these controls. I want a login button here. I want a forgot password, blah, blah, hit go. And you get in your design system a laid out wireframe. It won't be right, you know, it'll still need a tweak. It'll probably be 80% of the way there. But I think that will happen. I'm very confident that we will get to a point where auto layout and, you know, laying out wireframes is not a manual job that we're doing by hand anymore. It's done with design systems, it's done with AI. Maybe even it's linked into testing, right? So your AI knows which version of A or B performs better. So your wireframes already have that intelligence built into them. So yeah, those are some trends I can think of.
To end on a negative note, then, is it?
I don't think it's AI will take all our jobs. I don't think that will happen, because there's always jobs, right? Like we were promised that, you know, there's adverts from the 1950s of like Americana, like a housewife cooking dinner and like a jet car parked in the driveway, right? It's like we were promised that technology would change everything and we'd work 4-hour days and 4-day work weeks. None of that ever happened, right? We've got the best tech that's ever existed and we all work more than ever and probably get less done. Mm-hmm. Like that's not a thing. So I think even if AI does try to take all our jobs, we'll still have jobs, because society would collapse if we didn't have jobs.
It's just a new tool. Like DALL-E, it's a new tool to create, an amazing tool to create, just like painting a brush, using a brush. So I mean, AI for creating mock-ups, it's something I've heard about as well. You know, it's just a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, human intervention will always have to be somewhere in the process.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. But again, that points to fewer, right? That points to fewer, more highly skilled people.
Mm.
So, yeah, interesting. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's all I've got on the future. Probably going to be wrong, but it's worth having a go, isn't it?
I noted it down so I can
Yeah,
send it to you.
send me a message in like 5 years' time saying, "Oh yeah, you were right about
5
that."
years.
Hey, I called Adobe buying Figma about 2 years ago. One of my team is like a massive Figma fanboy. Was like, "No, it'll never happen. Their market cap's like 6 billion already." I was like, "Definitely, Adobe are definitely going to buy them," and they did, and I was right. So the important thing to remember from that anecdote is that I was right about something.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a
Michael
lot.
Bond, welcome our new Adobe overlords.
I know it's back to Sketch again.
Back to Sketch. I love Sketch.
It was hard enough getting out of it, and then
I was really deep into Sketch for a long time. I was building plugins and all kinds of stuff, and then Figma came along, and I was like, "Oh, all the keyboard shortcuts are the same. This is fine. I can just use this. This is no problem." But yeah, it's bound to happen, wasn't it?
from Photoshop to Sketch,
Yeah.
and back again.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, thanks.
That's okay. I hope it was good.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
Great.